white and we're looking good. You'll be in for a fight and we fight pretty good. Getting goals is our job and we get goals good. Looking good, we are Carlisle United.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Brunton Bugle, the number one place to get your Carlisle United fix in the podcast world. I'm Lee Rooney.
And I'm Mike Booth.
United get back to winning ways with a narrow 1-0 victory over Gillingham at Brunton Park. We look back on a hard-earned 3 points against the Gills and look ahead to another home fixture as struggling Rochdale make the journey up the M6 this weekend. You know, Mike, you nearly caught me out there because, as you pointed out just before we were about to start recording, I hadn't changed the name in the introduction to Mike Booth. I'd put, and I'm Dan McLennan. So when you said, and I'm Mike Booth, I looked at it, I was like, that's not, oh no, wait, it is right, isn't it? And I was nearly stumbled on my words there. I was very,
I'm a
very
professional, I can adapt to any situation that
terrific,
is put in front of me.
An absolutely terrific bit of ad-libbing. Well done to you, Mike, there. Fantastic stuff. How you doing, mate? Obviously, we went up to the game of the weekend, didn't we? And it was not the most entertaining affair, but a good 3 points in the end.
Yeah, you got to grind out wins in games like that, haven't you? And it's, obviously, we'll touch on that shortly. But yeah, I'm good. Obviously, we're recording this on the Wednesday, and with there been no game last night, of course, whatsoever, I caught up on a few little odd jobs around the house that needed doing. You know, I polished all my coat hangers and I arranged all my rice into size order. It's some of them jobs that just need doing that you just never really get round to doing otherwise, you know. Yes,
we'll talk about the no midweek game thing in a minute, because I think we owe our annual explanation as to why we don't cover a particular game, shall we say. But before we get started, just before I do the little sponsors bit, just to say thank you to everyone who got in contact about the football manager researcher role. I had about 4 or 5 people show interest, so that's really good to see. I haven't got back to any of you yet, I do apologise for that, but what I'll do is tomorrow I'll drop you all an email and get you in contact with Dean from Sports Interactive, basically, to see who's most suitable for the role. But yeah, big thank you again, once again, to everyone who showed interest in that. And yeah, so just a reminder, obviously, yet again this season, we are being sponsored by the Carlisle United Supporters Club London branch. The London branch is open to all Carlisle United fans. They've got members from Cornwall to Dundee and Houston, Singapore, and of course, every part of London and the South East. They regularly meet up on away trips, as well as arranging many social events, sports games, and fundraising for the club. They'll be providing us with information for the away games as part of the preview section this season too. You can find out more about the London branch at their website, carlisle.londonbranch.org. Also a reminder, get subscribing us on any good podcast app if you don't already. I know some people who go online onto the website and listen to the podcast there, which is great, but the easiest way to do it, if you've got a mobile phone, download a podcast app. There's loads of good ones out there. You can use Spotify, you can use Apple Podcasts if you've got an Apple phone, Google Podcasts if you've got a Google phone, Pocket Cast, there's various others. What do you use, Mike? What do you use to listen to the podcast?
I use Spotify personally. Spotify,
there you go. So Mike's a Spotify man. I'm a Pocket Cast man because I like to keep my music and my podcast separate, and it's a really easy app to use. I'm not getting paid to tell you this. It is genuinely a great app. I used to use the Acast app, but unfortunately they got rid of it a few months ago, which was quite upsetting because I had a shed load of podcasts to listen to on there as it was. But yeah, just go on any good podcast app, search for Brunton Bugle, click subscribe, and every time a new episode comes out, you'll get a little alert to let you know, and you can then download it and listen to it on the go. And obviously, on those apps, if you can if you can give us a rating as well, that would be fantastic. They usually have a 4 or 5 star rating sort of thing, you know. So if you can give us a 5-star rating, that would be lovely, and a review as well. Actually, that'd be fantastic. And also, you can follow us on social media at Brunton Bugle on Twitter and Instagram. I promise you, I will start putting stuff on the Instagram feed too. I really do promise you. I'll try and do something this Saturday maybe, because I'm going up to the game with our good friend Johnny, who's also a listener. So we'll try and do a few little bits when we go to the game. You can also find us on Facebook. Click like on Facebook, and when you find the page, and email us bruntonbugle@gmail.com. And we also post on the Be Just and Fear Not Facebook group and on the Cummins.net message board. Right, that's all the usual stuff out of the way, Mike. So, yeah, you sort of touched on the fact that there wasn't a midweek game there. We're being a little bit facetious when we say that, obviously, because a game took place this week between Carlisle United and a Premier League side's under-21 team. We don't talk about those games. From the very start of this podcast, we've had a principled point that we stand on, that we do not talk about what is the Papa John's trophy, basically. It used to be the Johnson's Spade trophy. Was the Checker Trade Trophy for a short while. In the past, if you want to go really far back, Auto Windscreen Shield, the Auto Glass Trophy, I think the Freight Rover Trophy or something like that, if you go really far back. Now, this competition was introduced in the 1980s, and the idea of the competition was to give lower league teams in Division 2, Division 3, or Division 3 and 4 as it was even back in the 80s, a chance to play at Wembley, wasn't it, Mike? That was the whole intention of it. And it's carried on. It's various different sort of guises and formats in the way they've done it. They've had group stages, they've had just straight knockouts, they've had like season where basically a certain number of teams have buys in the early rounds, don't they, Mike? I think back in the day we've had that a few times.
Yeah.
So,
they had non-league clubs in it at one point and taken them out and stuff like that.
Yeah, so they've had all kinds of different formats. In the early stages, this competition has never been well supported in terms of crowds, has it?
No.
That said, the crowds actually in the early stages, before they introduced the latest format, weren't that bad. They weren't great, but they weren't awful. You could go back into the late 80s, early 90s. You used to struggle to get crowds of 800-900 for a lot of teams in the early stages of the competition. The later stages of the competition is where the crowds pick up. Not too dissimilar to the League Cup, just obviously at a much sort of lower level of the crowds generally anyway. Now, a few years ago, or 7 seasons ago I think it was now, the EFL decided, in a way, they were struggling to get sponsorship for the competition, and they managed to sort of sponsorship through the Premier League's help. And the Premier League said they would do it as long as they could have a certain number of Category A, I think it is, isn't it? Academy sides.
Or Category 1, I think.
Category 1, I think you're right there. Sorry, I do apologise. Academy sides were able to take part in the competition as under 21 or under 23. I think this is the confusion. No one knows it. I think it's under 21 now, isn't it? It used to be under 23. And the whole idea is that they would be allowed to take part in the competition, basically, to help these young players develop, right? We were also told under the guise that it would basically help young English players develop, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a joke, as we'll touch on in a sec. But understandably, that created quite an angry reaction from die-hard fans of lower league teams. Because what you are doing there potentially... Now, people may say, well, because what you are doing is giving those under-21 academy sides the chance to go to Wembley in a competition. And take away that chance from a lower league team. The whole intention of the competition is you get a day out, you get to go to the final. As Carlisle fans, we know that. Mike, you'll have been to quite... How many of the finals have you been to that Carlisle have been to in it?
I've been to 3 of them.
3 of them. It's a brilliant day out, isn't it? The chance to go and see your team playing in a final at Wembley or at Cardiff, as it was for a few years, and win a trophy. It's an incredible thing. You don't get that feeling that often as a lower league fan because of the fact that obviously, the FA Cup and the League Cup realistically, more often than not going to be out of reach of us, aren't they? Mm-hmm. So the argument is, but the academy sides, none of them have got to the, they've only got as far as the quarterfinals. Like, yet, that is the point.
Yeah.
The second one of those teams gets to the final, the competition's ruined for me.
Yeah.
It becomes...
And it sounds weird and it sounds hypocritical. If Carlisle got to the final, I wouldn't go. And it sounds weird. Well,
we wouldn't cover it. We would not cover it.
Yeah, but it sounds weird to say the whole point of the competition is to give clubs like us a shot at Wembley, and if we get to Wembley, I'm not going. But they've completely ruined what the competition's about, and the whole reasons behind it, I mean, like you were saying, it's to help the national team. You have the likes of Chelsea a couple of years ago played Belgium international Battershy, and how's that going to help the England national team? Whereas that same season, Luton Town played 11 kids, which is surely more likely to help the England national team than playing a 25-year-old Belgian. Luton Town played their kids and they got fined for it.
And wasn't one of those kids, I might not be one at that time, but one of the players to come through Luton's academy in recent years is James Justin, isn't it? Who's at Leicester City, who's now an England international. So, where's the logic in that, eh? And I mean, was it Stoke City had 34-year-old or 33-year-old Charlie Adam playing for them in some of those games?
Yeah,
Scottish
exactly.
Charlie Adam. So, it's up to people whether they want to go to those games. But my argument would be, if you do that, you are basically, justified is the wrong word, but you are basically making the EFL and the PL think, it's completely acceptable to have these under-21 sides in a lower league cup competition. And that's just the first step. Because you all know what the next step is, because Pep Guardiola said it enough times. You know, he said, "Oh, we need to have B teams into the EFL to help us. You know, our young players aren't developing quickly enough." Oh, that's absolute bollocks, quite frankly.
Exactly.
If you know what? If they haven't got enough game time and stuff, stop stockpiling them. Stop taking all the best youngsters away from the lower league teams.
And if you want them to get experience playing against Football League players, send them out on loan.
Yeah, or just don't sign them until they're ready from a lower league team. I mean, Everton, fair play, they signed Bradford from us, and at least he's played a little bit of first team football them, or they sent him out on loan when they can. But you look at Liam McCarron. Leeds United signed him from us after 20 games.
Yeah.
And how many games did he play for Leeds in that time? 1, 2?
Exactly.
If that. And now he's at Stoke City, and I know he's injured now, but he's not even getting games for them.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's countless examples of players like that. But I mean, the thing for me is if B teams are to enter the league, that's obviously at the expense of an actual football club. I mean, we sort of joke on here that the likes of Crawley or someone like that or Salford are not a proper football club.
But they've earned it through promotions.
Compared to a B team, they absolutely are. And if they're allowed in the league, we could be playing Southampton B team on a Eastleigh's stadium in front of like 400 people.
We could be playing Everton at Southport or Marine, something like that.
I mean, I'd go to that, to be fair. But
you scab.
Yeah,
there was a bigger crowd than expected for that game on Tuesday night, which is disappointing.
Yeah.
But I imagine it's a lot of kids going to watch them, particularly as it's one of the bigger under 21 sides, isn't it? So that was a bit of a disappointment. But then we've seen against the likes of the Leicester and the Wolves that we played in previous seasons. The crowds have been tiny for those games. Like we struggled close to our lowest ever crowds. Some of those games,
but as well, by all accounts, there was people with like my shirts in the home end and stuff like that, and it's just
we're not going to say the name of them there. Well, you've done it now, haven't you? So that team basically, there were people who live in the city of Carlisle who support that particular Premier League team were going in their shirts in the home ends. It's particularly embarrassing, but there you go. The truth is, we just don't care about the competition more, which is really sad because we used to go to watch a lot of games. And I remember me and you, the last season before this format was brought in, we went to watch them, play them at Tranmere, didn't we? Yeah, it was quite an entertaining game. I seem to remember that one. It was like I think we lost on penalties possibly that night. I seem to remember, but
I think so. Yeah,
fairly entertaining fixture that was. So it's sad what it's become, but we are sticking to our principles on this one. And if people want to go, that's their choice. But if B teams then get put into the league, it's on your head. That's all I'll say. Yeah. And I do applaud John McCollum. Obviously, he has a job to do, and I totally appreciate that. But he very much sticks to his principles on his thoughts on the competition, and good on him for that. So there you go. Right, I think we've talked long enough about why we don't talk about those games.
Yeah,
Mike, haven't we? And you've given me a point where I'm going to have to bleep the name of the team out as well. So so there you go. Let's talk about proper EFL League action. An absolute no, it wasn't a thriller at all, was it? It was a pretty stinking game overall. But United got the 3 points. It was a 1-0 win against Gillingham at the weekend. Not a huge amount of action to talk about on this one, I think it's fair to say. But as we said at the start, Mike, fairly happy with the result in the end.
Yeah, 3 points is all that matters at the end of the day, isn't it? And not just the 3 points, but they didn't really have any shots that tested wholly. No. I mean, it says here they had 8 shots on goal, 3 on target. I can't think of any. I can't think of him making saves. He sort of had a few loose balls to collect, and he did that absolutely brilliantly. But shots-wise, they really didn't do anything. And it's a bit of a trend now that he doesn't seem to have a lot of shots to face, which is sometimes the sign of a good keeper if you're able to organise your defence in front of you.
Yeah, well, what I would say is I went back through and I looked through the... I always, after every game, when we're going to cover it, what I do is I go through and I watch the extended highlights on the iFollow, which is about 9 minutes away from the end, with a little, so you get a fair bit in there. Some of the bits they put in as highlights were crosses that were claimed by the keepers. That tells you all you need to know. Because thinking back to some of the other games, the Swindon game, for instance, there was a lot of highlights packed into that, and it was actually quite exciting. This, nothing of the sort. It was pretty poor. The only real big chance I think they had was the chance for the lad who should have been sent off, who we'll talk on about later. What's his name? Titonda. He had that chance where the ball sort of came across the box and Mandron made an arse of controlling it at first, but then managed to get it over to Tonde, and he hit a sort of first-time shot that Holy sort of parried and then claimed at the second attempt, but that was about as good as their chances got, really. But they had a header that went wide as well, possibly, but that wasn't included in the extended highlights, so it can't have been that good of a chance.
I mean, at the same time, the only real other chance that I feel we had was that Paul Huntington header, which forced a very, very good save from their keeper.
Yeah, that's probably, to be fair, we didn't have a huge amount of chances of ourselves. That's a fair assessment, actually. But yeah, in terms of when we arrived for the game, Mike, team selection, no major surprise. I suppose the major surprise was that Huntington started, because I think the hope was that he'd maybe have a little bit more time to get himself ready, maybe even feature in that midweek game that we don't talk about to build his fitness up. But actually, in the end, I think the Stevenage game sort of necessitated maybe a change of getting someone a bit more physical in there.
Yeah, definitely. And he looked great, didn't he? And yeah, you can't really disagree with that. He seems to be relatively in decent shape. Obviously, he needed to take it off in 70 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he had an absolutely fantastic game, didn't he?
Yeah.
He really did.
Yeah. Well, we'll go into a bit more detail on how good he was actually in a minute once
Yeah.
we talk about some of the chances and stuff. A little bit harsh on Jack Ellis to drop out of the matchday squad, maybe, but he's going to have those sort of coming in out of the squad over the season. I think it's a good learning curve for him, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel Ellis is one of them. When you had Branthwaite coming through at a similar sort of age. In fact, I think Branthwaite is a little bit younger, wasn't he? I mean, Branthwaite was coming in and he looked special. And this, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way towards Ellis, but Ellis doesn't look like the same level as Branthwaite, but he can just come in, do a job, and that's what you want from him. And I don't think, well, God forbid, we're going to have another injury crisis like we've got now, but it's good to have a player that you can just call on and he can do a job when needed.
And I reckon he'll get these chances at right wing back as well, actually, because back's done really well at the start, but it's a bit much to expect him to play the full 90 minutes of the whole season, all 46 games. He's going to have spells where he's going to have to come out because he's a young lad as well, to be fair. Nice to see Moxon back in a bit earlier probably than expected as well. The thought was he might be on the bench this one, but he replaced Harris, and then another great game from him, so that was good to see.
Yeah.
I think that in terms of team selection, that was probably about what we expected, really. Well, let's talk about the game itself then, Mike. Let's talk about the goal, really. Let's get straight to it. The only goal of the game, John Mellish. He's been credited with it. Is it his goal?
Yeah, why not?
I think if the EFL has a disputed goals panel, I have a feeling they may take a look at that and go, that's not his goal, that one.
I mean, look, there is an argument that it was maybe going wide when it left.
It's going well wide. It's a cross, isn't it, really? When you look at it from the angles.
At the end of the day, a player who is sort of getting into them sorts of positions and getting onto balls like that deserves credit. And
it was
that
a lovely
credit
move,
has
wasn't
come
it?
in the form of being awarded a goal.
It was a lovely move, though, wasn't it? I mean, it starts off with Gibson nicking the ball pretty much in front of the dugouts on the right wing. And he brings the ball right to the edge of the box. And it's frustrating, this Gibson. He wants to try and do it all himself sometimes. And he's been fantastic this season. He really has. But there's some moments, why are you taking a shot there? But then fair play, he recovers the ball well. And he used it so well to pick out Armour. He sort of gets down towards the byline and does a lovely little back heel into the path of an underlapping John Mellish. It can be a really effective weapon in that sort of way, can't he? Bursting into the box.
Well, he kind of initially tried to overlap, and then that wasn't on. So then he ran inside. Yeah. And, it was a great sort of improvised little move, wasn't it, really? Yeah,
and then he slides in, and it looks like the ball's getting away from him. Full credit to him. He slides in and just pokes the ball on it, and it comes off Max Amer and goes into the net. He probably should be a Max Amer on goal, but at the moment, it's gone to Big John, and who are we to argue with that, eh?
Yeah.
It's one of those things, though, isn't it? I think Mellish can really do that role really well. Sort of the overlapping, underlapping centre-back, however you want to call it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he can really bomb up the pitch. And actually, in the way we play, obviously Whelan started the weekend, but what you can do you can almost then switch to a 4-4-2, can't you? As Mellish almost bombs up the left wing. Gibson just does it down the right wing. It's quite an adaptable way of playing, isn't it?
That was where we saw the best of Mellish as a midfielder, when he could bomb forward kind of undetected. And we had the debate so many times last season, didn't we? Mellish in a 2 or Mellish in a 3 in midfield. And it's kind of the same with centre-back. Like, if you were to play him in a 2 at centre-back, he has to be a little bit more restricted. But in that 3, he's got the freedom. And you want him to have freedom, and you want him to be uncaged and ready to unleash havoc on teams.
Yeah. Well, we can talk a little bit more about Mellish's performance, Sean. I think we'll talk about both Huntington and Mellish, because I think both of them were fantastic at the weekend. I mean, let's talk about the chances during the game other than the goal. I mean, there's not really much to pick out, is there? I mean, I've really struggled watching the highlights with this. I mean, Amari had an early header from a back cross at the right, which he maybe could have done a little bit better with. But actually, when you look at it back, he's having to get quite high to get to it, and it's not an easy one to sort of direct. I think if he's going to direct it towards goal, I think the keeper's probably got a decent chance of saving it. To be honest, it's one of those ones, isn't it?
Yeah, but if he saves it, does he parry it out? And,
yes,
you know,
true. Could have done a little bit better, I think it's fair to say. I think a fully fit and fully more sharp and switched on Patrick probably does a bit better with that. Christian Dennis, probably his only chance of the game, really, picking the ball up inside the Gillingham half. Takes it on from 30 yards, and it's high and wide in the end. It's a bit closer than I thought, actually, though, when you watch the highlights back. It looked like it was well wide at the time, but actually wasn't too far off. And for a player who's a snibber and, you know, someone who's getting goals in the 6-yard box and that kind of thing, I fancy him to score a real belter for us this season. He's got a real belief about him, hasn't he?
I mean, it was very much a confident player's shot, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he'd have tried that if he wasn't on the little run that he was on. But yeah, I think if you did a little heat map of all of his goals this season, they'd all be certainly in the box, wouldn't they?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just fancy him to get one of those, because he has scored a few of those for Chesterfield in the past, so he's got that in him. Finn Back nearly scored an own goal, didn't he? The one panicky moment at the back. To be fair, he had to get something on it because the lad would have been in otherwise, and he just heads it out just sort of wide of Holy's net. And I think Holy might even, you know, being the big lad he is, Holy may have been struggling to get on the end of that. We mentioned the Tatonda shot that Holy saved just before. As you mentioned before as well, Huntington's so close with that header. It doesn't look quite as impressive on the highlights, does it? The save from the keeper, but from the angle we were in the paddock, you could see actually the ball comes through a group of players before the keeper saves it, doesn't it? It doesn't really quite give you that perspective when you're looking at it from the main camera gantry. So it wasn't
even
really
on the YouTube highlights. That
was
header.
it not?
No.
Oh wow, I was surprised with that because it genuinely was a really good chance.
And it's not like there was a lot of other highlights that could have been.
I mean,
picked
some of the ones they
of
put
it.
in were crosses straight to the keepers. It's ridiculous. I do wonder sometimes how they pick those highlights. It's a bit bizarre. And the only other real moment of worry, I think there was a header they had on late on that was wide, but it was similar to Patrick's chance. It's a chance, but it's not a clear cut one. The only other one was Huntington. The one time he nearly got caught out was a little ball over the top, and the lad Kashket was in, and he's sort of stretching to try and get it under control, isn't he? He just can't get enough to kill the ball dead, and Holy, being the alert stopper he is, he was out to claim it. And yeah, the result is another clean sheet for Big Tomash, which is good to see. Yeah, should we do one of the 6-second reviews now then, Mike?
Yeah, go on.
So first up, we've got Kieran Bullman. He sent us one in. We've got the two Bullmans, Greg and Kieran, today. I don't think they're actually related. They might correct me on this after we've recorded. But here's Kieran's one. This is a belter. He's very verbose in his language, shall we say.
I thought that this was a quintessentially game of two halves involving two sides where it is probably too early to say whether they are evenly matched or not. I thought we struggled to take a foothold in the game after a fairly bright opening. I thought we were a bit disjointed, disorganised, discombobulated and gave the ball away on way too many occasions. Second half we picked up exponentially, I thought. Started playing an effective pressing game, which ultimately resulted in a goal by the ever-tenacious John Mellish. All in all, the result was more pleasing than the performance. But you know what they say, play ugly, win ugly is the making of potentially a very good team. That's Kieran, the East End.
Kieran's swallowed the thesaurus there, didn't he? Some cracking words in there, wasn't it? It's great to hear. Thank you, Kieran, very much for your report. And I don't think you could disagree with any of that, could you, Mike, really?
No, certainly not. I think he summed it up. But there's one thing that you didn't put down here, and that's the fact that Gillingham should have had a red card.
You know what? I haven't put it in there, but you're absolutely right. I was going to discuss that. Well, let's briefly talk about that then. So, for those who weren't there, their left wing back, Titonda, I think he's one of their better players actually. First half, from one of their set pieces, we went to break away, and he pulled back Finn back. It was a cynical one, wasn't it? It was a blatant yellow, no arguments from him at all, just the way it is. Then into the second half, we started the second half really brightly. The first 5 minutes especially, we were really got at them, didn't we?
Yeah,
we didn't manage
this was in the first couple of minutes of the second half, wasn't it?
I think in the first 5 minutes, yeah. And so basically, ball comes out to the right wing, and Finn back shows a lovely bit of skill to get past Titonda initially. And Titonda just lunges in, and it's literally right on the edge of the box, and brings down back, and back is into the area basically. If he doesn't take down back, he's in with a clear chance to put a cross in for Dennis to score, basically, or something similar. The referee decides, no, it's not a yellow card. He doesn't even have a word with Titonda. That's the thing that surprised me. He just... Nothing. Neil Harris, go on.
Well, quite often in the past, if a player's on a yellow, pretty much any foul from that point is a second yellow. But that was a yellow in its own right.
It's cynical. It was cynical, wasn't it? And Neil Harris, being the switched-on manager, he was fair play to him. He recognised straight away, back's got him on toast here. I'm going to have to take him off. Literally, the set piece was taken and the ball was cleared out for a throw-in. And basically, in fact, that was when the header came in, wasn't it, from Huntington, from that set piece, not long after. And basically, the ball was cleared out, went out for a throw-in, and he got subbed off. Yeah. And there was and you could see Simmer was fuming about it, wasn't he? You know, he gets sent off. That changes the game completely. Yeah, we won it in the end, but we could have won it more comfortably potentially.
But at the same time, I've been to games before where, because obviously it was level at this point, and obviously a lot of away teams come and they sort of hope for a point, or maybe they can snatch a win. But once they go down to 10 men, it's just 10 men behind the ball all game and give everything for that 1 point. Yeah. So, you know, it's 50-50, isn't it? We could have maybe battered them if he'd gone, but at the same time, they could have really drawn the game out more and frustrated us, and it could have just been a 0-0 draw.
Yeah, absolutely. One of those days, isn't it, where the ref wasn't actually that bad, to be fair. He didn't get a huge amount wrong, but that was the one thing that really stood out for, like, he should have been a bit more clinical there, isn't it? It's one of those ones, I suppose he looks at it, maybe he's thinking of the fact, because at that point, Titonda was the only person who'd been booked. And I suppose maybe he's thinking, I don't want my 2 bookings in one game to be just sending one bloke off for literally the only 2 bookable offences in the match. But it still should be. That's what it should be the case. Cause
exactly.
That's what he did. So, but yeah, couldn't agree more with what Kieran said in his bit. It's good to hear. Now, let's have our regular 60-second review. Here's Greg with his thoughts on the game.
Right, I thought that was a scrappy affair on Saturday. 2 teams who didn't really create a lot of chances and look like scoring. Neil Harris, their gaffer, said that he thought the 15 minutes at the start of the second half was the difference, and I have to agree with him. We came out like with a bit of intent, but other than that, we didn't create a lot. Man of the match, I would say, is John Mellish. I thought Paul Huntington orchestrated the back 5 really well. He looked like a natural leader, so it was a flip of the coin between the 2 of them for me for man of the match. But both teams look like they're going to have problems scoring goals. We need to get some strikers back fit and pronto.
Well, there you go. That's Greg's assessment on the game. Again, wouldn't disagree with too much there, really. His point about the strikers is an interesting one, isn't it? The fact that, I completely agree with him about Gillingham. Gillingham do look like a side that will really struggle to score this season. Mandron up front for them was... I mean, he just about got out of Huntington's pocket when he got subbed off for Kashket, didn't he? He was that poor. But an interesting point about whether we need to... I mean, I suppose we do need to get Edmondson fit and available, and the same with Joe Silver in terms of offering something a little bit different from the bench. But for me, I don't think we actually created that much this weekend. So it wasn't a case of missing so many chances, was it?
No, I mean, it's going to sort of seamlessly segue into another point a little bit here. But, I mean, Patrick wasn't on it, really. No. And I'm a big fan of Amari. And given the sort of lack of pre-season that he's had, And obviously he's had a newborn and he's, by all accounts, not sleeping very much. You know, it's understandable that he's not at the top of his game. And I think when Edmondson comes back, we're actually going to get 2 players back for the price of 1, because we've seen a few times with Amari Patrick, when he is sort of a sub, he can make one hell of an impact off the bench. And he's done it multiple times with us where he forces the manager's hand and says, look, I have to be in the starting 11. This is what I do when I come on for 30 minutes. You know, put me in the starting 11. So I think when Edmondson's back, I think we'll then see the best of Amari Patrick as well. Yeah,
I think someone like Edmondson will help him, because at the weekend we were lumping a lot of long balls up to Patrick, and you know, he's a big lad, but he's not that big. He's only maybe 6'1", maybe about 6'2", but possibly he's not the tallest lad, and he isn't the best in the air, and that's a simple fact of it. You know, that's not his strength. It's something I'm sure he'd love to work on and become better at. But his strength is getting the ball down to his feet and getting him, you know, taking on plays. And we were a little bit too eager to go long to him, and not in a good way of, you know, trying to pick him out with a long raking ball, you know, over the top, that kind of thing. So I think there's a little bit of both sides here, isn't it? I think Mari just needs to get himself fit and get himself back in form. I think once he gets a goal, he'll be flying again, because he's a confidence player and he thrives on that. So I'm not too worried at the moment about Amari. I think it's just a case of, like I said, getting his fitness levels up and getting him that goal. And hopefully we can do that at the weekend. Maybe that partnership with Dennis isn't quite working as well at the moment. So it's one of those ones, if Edmonton's fit for the weekend, do you start him maybe and give Amari a little rest and bring him on as a sub later on?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, if Edmondson is fit to play on the weekend, he's probably not going to be fit to play the full 90. So I think maybe if he's fit enough to start him, give him 60 minutes, and then bring Amari on off the bench.
Yeah, maybe that's your option. Well, I mean, let's talk about some of the other talking points I put down, Mike. Got to talk about the 2 defenders, and let's talk about them. In fact, before we do, I've got to give a little mention to Corey Whelan, because it feels bad that we're going to talk about these 2 here, Huntington and Mellish. But actually, Whelan's not done much wrong since he come into the team. It's one of those things. The one from you have is there's in the last few games, there's been one incident per game that I've been to, at least anyway, where you just see his pace get found out. That's the one thing you think, if you just had that little bit of pace, he'd be to be fair, if he had a little bit of pace, he probably wouldn't be playing at our level, because he's got the right attributes. He's a decent player, but his lack of pace is quite glaring at times when he's up against one-on-one against the players, and that's the frustrating thing with Whelan.
Yeah, I think you summed it up spot on there. He had one moment, didn't he, where he was beaten for pace, and it nearly let Gillingham in. But apart from that, he had a very, very solid game. But sometimes one mistake like that can cost you a game. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the other 2 then. I mean, should we start with Huntington rather than Mellish this time? I mean, for his full debut, you know, the feeling was that he was still needed a little bit of time to get himself fit, and that was shown by the fact that he had to come off for 70 minutes. But my God, he cruised through that game, didn't he? Yeah, and his reading of the game was just fantastic, wasn't it? He could see things happening way before they did. He had a little clump of players' shirts at some point. It's things like that, isn't it? It's things like when Mandron was setting himself to go for a jump, just giving him a little nudge in his back. Nothing that'll give away a free kick. Yeah. Just the lightest nudge, just to knock him off his course. And then Huntington's in. And Huntington must have won pretty much every header up against. And Mandron had at least an inch on him. Mandron was taller than Huntington, but Huntington won everything in the air against him. He was so impressive. And Mellish was the same, to be fair, in terms of aerial threat as well. Yeah. But he reads the game so well, doesn't he? As you say, he screens the thing. And the way he was being a leader at the back, and he doesn't need to be captain. This thing, I heard a few people saying, "Oh, why is Whelan captain? Make Huntington." It's like, doesn't need to be. He can do the job without the armband. He's more than capable of doing that, and I'm sure at some point he probably will end up being captain, because he is that impressive. But he reads the game. So he's passing as well. Actually, that's something a lot of people don't seem to forget. He's so good on the ball, isn't he? There was one raking ball he played across to, I think it might have been to Finn back on the right, that was seriously impressive. Another one to pick out Dennis. So that's going to be a really good weapon for us as well, because we haven't really had that since Granger, have we? No, and sort of more recently this season, I think when Barkley was out, we missed, because Barkley was actually pretty good at passing it out from the back, and that's something that we missed when he was injured. So yeah, it's good to have, and I almost feel for Barkley, because when he's fit again, he's really going to struggle to get back in the team.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I mean, let's talk about Mellish then as well. Then I mean, I genuinely think it's a little bit underrated how much he's actually improved under Simpson, especially as a defender. Yeah. I think it doesn't get talked about enough. That forget the fact you say it's a back three, he's only good in that. I genuinely think he could do a decent job in a back two now.
He could do a decent job. I wasn't disputing that before.
No. I wasn't saying you having a go. I should say sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you get the best out of his strengths in a back three, but in a back, I genuinely think he could do it in a back four as well now. I think the thing that stands out for me on the weekend, and it's interesting this because the stats seem to suggest he was more wasteful in the passing than it actually was. I thought he used the ball so well and he kept it so well. His passing is so much better than it has been for quite a while, isn't it?
Yeah. He did quite a lot of passes back to Holy. I think he probably passed it to Holy more than any other player on the pitch. But yeah, and he carried it out of defence well. Obviously, I brought my mate Neil up, who lives in Newcastle, and it's quite interesting sometimes to get people's input who don't go to games very often. Yeah. And he said straight away that Mellish was the best player on the pitch for him, and the way that he brought the ball out of defence, and physically, I don't think he lost a single duel. No,
that's one impressive thing, and he's one actually who has got a little bit of pace about him as a defender, hasn't he? And when he gets up to full speed, and we saw it in the Swindon game. McCurdy only just about got away from him, and he did enough to put him off in that game when he got 1-on-1. So that's going to be a real big asset as well, I think, for the rest of the season. And yeah, it's genuinely. I mean, I've got to give a shout out as well, because I know that I don't know whether his mum listens to the podcast, but I know she's a very vocal supporter of his on Twitter, isn't she? It's fair to say she's. I
wish my mum supported me as much as John Mellish's mum supports him.
Yeah, don't we all? Yeah, she's very, very good, as she should be, a strong supporter of his, and she had to give a mention of that. And I've got to think this deserves more of a shout out, is the fact that obviously he got the Man of the Match award, which means you have to go up to the sponsors lounge, get your champagne bottle and say thank you to the sponsors and all that important stuff. But as he left, there was a load of kids waiting outside, and apparently he stayed and signed every single one of their autographs before he even went up to the sponsors, and he posted photographs and stuff like that. And he seems to be someone who really gets the club as much as anything as well. He's a really, we see every week he plays with his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, he's our longest serving player as well, isn't he? Let's not forget that. And I think his passion rubs off on other people as well, and I think if he plays like that, he probably trains like that as well and brings out the best of others around him.
Yeah, I mean, he's 24 now. He's still a young lad. Of course, obviously, there's a chance that big clubs might start looking at him, but you'd hope that actually you might look at him. This is somewhere I can be for a long time, because he's someone, I don't know whether his skills would transfer maybe to like a championship level or not, but I think he could do it at League One, and if he can do that with us, he could be a player who gets to the championship with us, potentially. That's the dream in the end, isn't it? I'm just having a quick look here, Mike, just to check. He's made over 100 appearances for us now, because obviously that first season he didn't make that many. And he's had a few little spells where he's been out injured, but, counting them all up here, 106, 108, about 130-osh in all competitions. It's quite impressive,
Well, you say he's had a couple of spells out injured. I'm touching wood here, but compared to other players, he seems to, obviously his fitness on the pitch, his running about is fantastic, but he seems to sort of avoid a lot of them little niggly injuries as well that other players pick up a little bit more.
Yeah, it's just the odd little ones here and there, but all things considered, he's only really had 2 full seasons, hasn't he? Because that first season wasn't a full one, and he was only in the team for short periods because Beach didn't fancy him as a defender at first, did he? Obviously, so. And that's proved to be a genius bit of work from Chris Beach in the end. I'm being facetious there a little bit, because he did a decent job in midfield for us for that one season when he played there fully. But yeah, no, I think he's been fantastic. His attitude's brilliant, and I tell you what, Feeney, Huntington, Mellish.
I know, and this is the thing as well. As things stand, we actually have one of the best defensive records in the Football League, and that's without us really seeing, like you say, Feeney, Huntington, Mellish. I mean,
that would be my back three. I'd have Feeney on the right of it. I know a lot of people put Feeney in the middle, but I'd put Feeney on the right because I think he's going to be a bit younger, a bit more mobile than Huntington. And Huntington can just screen the back five from that position. But yeah, it's quite exciting to think how they're going to. I mean, and then you look at it. You've got, like you said, you've got Barkley waiting to come in. who's been brilliant. Whelan's done a good job for us this season. You've got young Idian from... They said it on radio the other day. James said it, and I can't remember now. Idahen, I think it is, to be fair. I think it's Idahen, who, seems to have done all right since he's come in. And then Jack Ellis also waiting as well. So we've got lots of options at centre-back. It's quite exciting, actually, isn't it?
It wouldn't surprise me if we see Jack Ellis go out on loan, to be honest, with all options.
I wonder if you wait until getting towards October and send him out on loan to a National League club on a 3-month loan where you can recall him after the first month rather than a half-season loan. That would make much more sense to me.
Yeah, I think certainly wait until Jack Senior is back from injury.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to wait till Joel Senior, I should say there.
Joel Senior, yeah.
Jack Ellis, obviously. You get confused there. But there you go. But yeah, no, fantastic. Defensively, we look so great at the moment. Got to give a mention to poor old Christian Dennis. The goal scoring runs ended. Certainly didn't put a bad performance in. It was, defensive work and good link play, but he didn't really have the supply for this match, did he? There was not really much given to him from the midfield.
No, and, it's a shame. And obviously, I thought that Bet365 had some kind of glitch where they were giving money away because the odds on him to score any time were a lot higher than I thought they should be.
Yeah.
But no, there was no glitch.
No glitch. It's back to the door. But no, hopefully he can get back to scoring ways against Rochdale the weekend. That's what we've got to hope for. Got to give a mention to Jack Armour as well, actually, before we do the quick League 2 roundup, because I thought he had another great game as well. I think he really is improving this season as well, isn't he? For
me, he's Mr. Consistent. Like you know what you're going to get out of him every week, and he's pretty much just 7 out of 10 every week. Obviously, he had that little, mistake maybe against Stevenage, but he's just solid, isn't he? And you know what you're going to get out of him. And again, he's only a young lad, and it's great to see. Yep,
absolutely. Right, well, I think that sums up the game. There's not a huge amount else to talk about from it because, like we said, wasn't the greatest game of football. And our trip up was a little bit disrupted, wasn't it, by the trains? But hopefully that'll be back to normal.
Cancel culture.
Indeed. Right, well, let's do a quick League 2 roundup to wrap up the first half, Mike. Just looking at the results of the weekend, for me, the thing that stands out, Leyton Orient. Their unbeaten run to season starts under Richie Wellens. They've been so impressive this season, haven't they?
Yeah, although, Hartlepool maybe weren't the toughest of opposition, shall we say.
Can only beat what's in front of you. And the big thing there for me is the fact that they're beating them 4-2. And their goal difference is already at 8, which is the best in the division. So that tells what you need to know. They're racking that up a little bit, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely.
You're absolutely right, yeah. But you are right, to be fair. It's not the top. It looks like it's nailed on that Richie Wellens will get manager of the month, doesn't it, at the moment? So no massive surprise there. But actually, it's a fair point when you look through their opening fixtures. They've had Crawley, who we played, and we saw Crawley weren't that impressive. They beat Mansfield at home, which is, that's a decent result. Drew with Swindon, beat Colchester. A lot of people beat Colchester this season, I think. And then obviously opening day, they beat Grimsby, who are probably going to be middling this season. So they've not had too many tough tests so far, but the fact is they're unbeaten. And, only them and Doncaster remain unbeaten. Doncaster, obviously, they got a really decent result the weekend as well, didn't they? Beating Northampton 1-0, who were quite well fancied this season. So that's a good result for them.
Yeah.
Because Northampton were the only other unbeaten sides left in the division, weren't they?
Yeah, so it's just Stevenage left?
Stevenage, no, they got beaten the weekend, 1-0 by Salford City, so their unbeaten start of the season is gone. Salford themselves, they've only lost one game so far, but they're doing really well as well, aren't they? Although they've lost, what's his name? The lad who's gone to West Brom.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not easy to remember his name.
He's got a double barrel surname, but anyway, he's gone to West Brom, so that could be a little bit of a blow for them unless they can get someone in before the end of the window tomorrow.
It's interesting. There's sort of a seamless segue yet again into our sort of next bit of the show, because obviously Rochdale picked up their first point of the season against Crawley. And I asked my mate, who's a Rochdale fan, is that sort of a bit of a bounce, with the sacking the manager? He says, no, Crawley are just absolutely awful.
Yeah, they're not a great side, are they? But we'll talk about that actually the last time they were in action in the second half of the show. Because Crawley's goal in that game was very impressive. You've not seen it. He pretty much side-footed it into the top corner from the edge of the box. Really good goal. But that looked to be about as good as they were for that match. As you mentioned, they played out a draw. Stockport still struggling to make an impact as well, though, aren't they? They're not really having a great start to the season. 1-1 draw with Swindon Town, only one win so far.
Yeah, I don't think any of us saw that coming, did we? But
No,
we really don't know what we're talking about, do we?
I think what we have to remember next time we do this is whoever finishes champions in the National League, they're not going to be flying up the league at the start of the season. That seems to be the way it goes. It's strange, isn't it? But with the investment they've done, you would have expected them to. You really would.
Exactly.
Harrogate, they suffered a heavy loss to Newport. They're obviously the next team we face in the league after Rochdale. Because they've got a decent result at Gillingham, but that doesn't look that impressive now because Gillingham looked that poor against us. So you do wonder, Harrogate maybe will finally break the hoodoo at Weatherby Road this week, not next weekend, so the weekend after this one, I should say. So can only hope. So yeah, as it stands, only Orient and Doncaster remain unbeaten. And at the bottom, it's Hartlepool, Rochdale and Crawley that are yet to win a game. So your prediction, obviously, you're not right about your prediction for the first manager to be sacked in. You went for Paul Hartley, didn't you, from Hartlepool?
Yeah.
But
no, I went for Sutton.
Sorry,
manager.
I do apologise. I think it might have been me that went for Paul. Someone went for Paul Hartley, didn't they? But it looks like that one might be the second one, the way things are going. So there you go. Right, time to take a break, and then we'll be back with the second half of the show.
This is John Mellish. You listen to the Brunton Bugle.
There's only one man I could pick for the halftime sting this week, and obviously that's Big Bad John. So there you go. Into the second half of the show, we're going to preview the Rochdale game shortly. We'll do the behind enemy line section in just a minute, but first up, Dan has given us a question of the week to do, and I'm really hoping it's a little bit better than the last one we had from him. So let's see what Dan's question of the week is.
On Friday the 6th of September 2002, Saturday's visitors Rochdale played up at Brunton Park on a Friday night. Unfortunately for us, they won 2-0, with a certain Mr. Paul Simpson scoring one of the goals. But my question is, which other ex-former Blue was his midfield partner that night?
I think I know this.
I don't. So
Now, when he says former Blue, he didn't say player. I think it might be Chris Beach. I have a feeling Beach was there that time.
That is a shout, yeah.
I could be wrong on that one, but I think if it's not Chris Beach, then I'm trying to think of else.
Yeah, no, Beach did play for Rochdale around that time, so yeah, that's
should we just do the answer now then? Because I'm not normally wait till the end, but let's see what the answer is. So we reckon it might be Chris Beach. Not 100% on that one, but let's see what Dan has to say.
Paul Simpson's midfield partner that night was Ian Bishop. Rochdale were his last league club. I think he possibly played at Radcliffe Borough afterwards, but he only made, I don't even think he made 10 appearances for Rochdale, but one of his last ones was in midfield beside Paul Simpson up here at Brunton Park.
Well, there you go. Well done, Dan. You have stumped us for once. There you go. That's a tricky one. You know what? I remember that because I remember it was a Friday night game. I remember going to it. And I remember Bishop and Simpson pretty much ran the midfield that night. It was, it was men against boys. That's how bad we were back then. But there you go. Oh well, there you go. Thanks for that one, Dan. Right. Up first in the second half of the show is the Behind Enemy Line section. And this week we spoke to Dean from the RochdaleAFC.com podcast. What did we talk about? Well, it's been a busy few weeks at Spotland, I think it's fair to say. Manager sacked, a new one appointed. Yes, we talked a lot about that, about the arrival of Jim Bentley. And we also discussed some of the off-the-field issues, which also have come to a slight resolution in the last week, which is good news for them. So here's the chat I had with Dean earlier today. So we're back with another Behind Enemy Line section. And this week we're talking to Dean from the RochdaleAFC.com podcast. Dean, good to have you on. Certainly an eventful week or two for Dale fans, isn't it? Robbie Stockdale sacked after 13 months in charge, and 11 days later, Jim Bentley appointed as his replacement. So, first up, what went wrong for Stockdale? He seems to have been a bit of another summer of upheaval for Rochdale, and it seems like, in terms of your squad quality especially, it seems to be in a bit of a downgrade.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the problem with Stockdale was kind of just we never really knew what he was trying to do. I think we kept saying it all the way through last season. We were never sure what kind of team he was trying to create. We knew he wanted to play with wing backs, but beyond that, it wasn't clear to see what the actual plan was. Whether we were trying to counter attack or keep possession, or just even be the kind of team that kind of breaks play up and is difficult to play against. We just were kind of nothing team, to be honest. And And I think some of the issues that we felt were there at the end of last season, like maybe a lack of experience and a lack of character, it felt like we'd maybe addressed that over the summer by getting players like Richard O'Donnell and Tumani Diagaraga and Ian Henderson coming back as well, like experienced heads. But the same issues were still there in the first few games of the season. And if anything, I think, especially away from home, we were pretty awful in those first 2 games under Stockdale at Gillingham and at Stevenage. So I think most supporters would probably have made that decision at the end of last season. But obviously we had a very difficult time off the field last year. So Stockdale was kind of given the benefit of the doubt by the board, which is it was nice of them to show that loyalty and give him that extra chance. But I think that it quickly became clear that was an incorrect decision, and I think the board should be credited for making that call early on, because it was a difficult one. But I can definitely understand why they did it, and like I said, I think most fans would have probably done that at the end of last season.
It's interesting to say you don't know what sort of a starter team we wanted them to be, because the 2 games we played against you guys, I was quite impressed actually. I thought you played some nice football, and that's maybe the one thing you were lacking was a bit of a killer instinct to the team. So maybe that's the way we looked at it. But I mean, let's talk about his replacement, Jim Bentley. Are you happy with his appointment? Certainly a bit more of a sort of Keith Hill mould of manager, I think you'd say, than some of your recent bosses. And obviously people are going to look and say, well, you've just appointed a guy who was sacked by a team in the National League North. It seems a bit weird, but he's got those years of experience at Morecambe, hasn't he? And I suppose that's the thing that your board are looking at with his appointment.
Yeah, I think that's definitely... I mean, especially where Morecambe were as a club at that point as well. They seemed to be constantly like the favourites for relegation, didn't they, every season? And he managed to keep them up. And obviously there was kind of stuff going on off the field there with players not being paid. So I think pretty much what he did at Morecambe can only really be considered success given where they were as a club at that time. And I think that's the kind of Jim Bentley that we're hoping we're getting. I don't think it's a particularly progressive appointment. I don't think he's going to be one of those that's probably going to like kick us on towards the top of the division in the next few years. But I think for the situation we find ourselves in, with, like you say, a bit of a downgrade on the squad and starting the season in pretty woeful form, it does seem to make sense on paper. I think some of the names that were mentioned before, like John Askey was one, and David Atta, I think they would have probably given me a little bit more hope than Bentley. But he's here now, so yeah, I think the fans will get behind him, and hopefully we'll see the kind of things that we're missing under Stockdale that can get us away from the relegation zone. Because right now, I think everyone who's connected to the club, that first and foremost, it seems strange to be saying it in August still, but the main priority is to make sure we don't go down this season.
Well, as Carlisle fans, we've been there before. Believe me. You know, when you know that you really, that's the main aim. So there you go. Mentioned the summer recruitment there before. You mentioned Ian Henderson's name. Now he obviously left the club a few years ago, didn't he? Did he go straight to Salford from you guys? Didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Chasing the money, one might say. How has he been welcomed on his return? Because he was a legend in his first spell for what he did with you guys, but he's coming back a little bit older now, and maybe not quite the same goal threat he was in his first time around. Yeah,
it doesn't look like it, which you'd expect, I guess, at 37. Yeah. He has always kept himself in good shape. Like it was always noticeable that even at like 33, 34 towards the end of his time at Dale, he never really looked like a player that was slowing down. But obviously those extra few years have made a difference. Basically in the league, he's done next to nothing so far. He's been pretty much anonymous, which is gutting really, because everyone was hoping he'd come in and kind of... Last season we did create a fair few chances, and like you say, we're missing that killer instinct. But then I think what's happened this season is we've lost a lot of those creative players. Corey O'Keefe went to Forest Green, Conor Grant went to Milton Keynes. So I think without that creativity, we haven't had the chances for Henderson to finish. He did score in the Pizza Cup on Tuesday night, which takes him... I think he's now 3 goals away from being our top scorer of all time, or maybe 3 from equaling the record. So look, the fans will love him regardless of what happens this season. Yeah. I think even the circumstances of him going to Salford, because on paper he was chasing the money, but also there was a fallout with David Bottomley, our former chief executive. It's fair to say is probably the least popular person in Rochdale. So I mean, even with that, it was kind of like, well, I can kind of understand why he's gone. So I think even with that, there's no real bitterness. he's been welcomed back with open arms, and hopefully if we can see him kind of start to get chances come his way under Bentley in a different system, then we know that if he's in and around the box and the ball lands at his feet, he's going to put it in the net. So if he can do that maybe even 10 times this season and help us get to 22nd, then it's legend status even further confirmed than it already was.
You mentioned there some of the departures, actually. Corey O'Keefe's an interesting one, because I remember you guys were all raving about him last season and how pleased you were to get him in from Mansfield on a permanent deal. What happened? I mean, is it just basically a case of a club from a higher division coming in and that's why he decided to leave? It seems a bit of a weird one. You only had him on a permanent deal for such a short period.
Yeah, he only actually signed a 6-month permanent deal when he signed in January. Basically, his loan deal expired at the start of January. We didn't have any of our games in January pretty much because of COVID, and he spent pretty much the whole month in contact with a few different clubs in League One and the Championship by all accounts. And then when none of them came off, he came back to us. But I think everyone was pretty much expecting him to leave this summer one way or the other. But yeah, he wasn't as good, to be honest, after he came back in January, and a lot of fans kind of were losing patience with him by the end. But he got 10 assists last season, and I don't think anyone else in our squad managed more than 3. So I think that speaks to like how important he was to us last season.
Yeah. In terms of the other summer editions, obviously you mentioned Diego Arga there. I think everyone knows about him from his time at Morecambe and other clubs as well. Any other players that we should be keeping an eye out for? No, it's a weird one to say, obviously, because you've had a tough start of the season, but is there any others? I mean, the only other name that Carl fans recognise probably is Conor Malley, who we had for a very short loan spell, very unsuccessful loan spell, I should say. But yeah, anyone else we should keep an eye out for?
Well, to be fair, Conor Malley's not played too much yet, but he played in that game at Accrington last night and was very good. So I would expect him to start, and if he can play like that again, then he should be dangerous. I think the player that I keep mentioning is Ethan Brierley. He's just 18. He scored his first goal for us last night. He is a hell of a talented player, and I don't think we'll keep hold of him for very long. He is a Dale fan though, so maybe that might convince him to stick around a little bit longer than we've seen some of our other youth products do. But yeah, he's 18 years old, got an unbelievable passing range, and just, you can just tell when a player is going to go to a higher level. They just stand out. He's definitely one of them. It's just whether, because of the situation we find ourselves in, he's still not starting every week, and I think maybe the management want to keep him out of the firing line a little bit, especially at such a young age. But yeah, if he's playing, he's one to look out for. And I think the other player that has shown glimpses so far, which maybe might surprise you given his record in the lower leagues before coming to us, is Devante Rodney. He looks like the kind of player that if we play a system that suits him, and we could get balls in behind for him to chase, then he might be a bit of a threat. But if we're trying to like lump it up and play him as a target man, then he isn't that. But with his pace, and he's scored 2 goals so far, one in the league and one in the League Cup, and both of them are really good finishes. So there's definitely potential there. And if we can play to his strengths, I think he'll end up being a decent player for us.
It's interesting what you said about Braley there, because it just brings me back flashbacks of Jared Brandwaite for us, and watching him as a 17-year-old cruising around in defence. You're like, yeah, he's not going to be here very long, is he? Everton came sniffing not long after, shock horror. So yeah, it was sort of covered in terms of the transfers coming in and things like that. What's the realistic aim for this campaign? I think I know what the answer is, because I think you've more or less told us this, but what's the aim for the rest of the campaign for Rochdale? Yeah,
if I'm being honest, my belief in this squad is quite low, so I will snap anyone's hand off for 22nd right now. I don't think that would have been the aim for most at the start of the season. I think I know a lot of pundits had us like 23rd, 24th, and a lot of our fans felt that was harsh. I was kind of the feeling that we might be maybe 19th, 20th. But yeah, the more that I've seen of this squad, the less convinced I am about its ability. But obviously, a new manager comes in, and like any other football fan, there's like a little bit of hope, isn't there? Comes from somewhere. So I think I will take 22nd right now. I know a lot of fans in the summer said maybe 12th, 13th. I think that's a pipe dream, to be honest.
Well, before I go on to the predictions, Dean, just got to quickly ask you as well about the off-the-field issues, because we talked about those a little bit last season, and the hostile takeover, which I think was seen off. How are things going in terms of all that sort of stuff at the moment?
Well, we had some great news last week. There was a court case involving Morton House because basically the club issued some shares. The Morton House took the club to court, or took the board of directors and the supporters trust to court rather than the actual club, because they felt that it diluted their shareholding. Thankfully, that case has been settled now. The club is still, the trust is still fundraising because they're a little bit short on the legal fees, but the fact that legal battle is over is a massive, massive weight off all of our shoulders. The only thing that's kind of still lingering from it is the EFL investigation. It will be harsh, we feel, that if the club were to be punished for the actions of former individuals who I mentioned earlier on the podcast. But I think once that is out, and I think once football fans, not just Dale fans, but football fans everywhere can kind of see exactly what happened in the report, I think it will be an interesting read. Let's put it that way. And I think there'll be some former Dale directors who will be wincing reading that. But once that is done, I think that should be pretty much it. Aside from the continued effort to raise funds to pay the legal fees, but I think even the majority of that, we seem to be on a good track with that. We seem to have most of that money seems to have been raised at this point. So it's looking a lot better off the field than it did 12 months ago. That's for sure. And I mean, the board of directors have come in incredibly tough circumstances last summer, and the job that they've done really has been phenomenal. I think the only mistake that they've made really is maybe sticking with Robbie Stockdale for slightly too long, and that leaving us in a bit of a difficult position on the pitch. But off the pitch, the club's in the best shape it's been for a long time, in my opinion. And long may that continue.
Well, that's good to hear. I think most Carlisle fans would agree on that, because I know that it's been to a lot of them. It's always an away day we look forward to going to Spotland, so it's really good to hear that. Right, before we finish up, Dean, we always ask at the end for your predictions for this weekend's games. So what are you going for?
Well, yeah, like I say, I'm not too hopeful about this team, and I know Carlisle have been strong at home, haven't they, so far? So I think it's going to be tough for us. But new manager, you always hope for a little bit of a bounce. So I'm going to say that we nick a point. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Okay,
well, there you go. That's interesting to see how it goes. Anyway, Dean, thanks for your time and all the best for the rest of the season.
Cheers, Lee. Thanks very much for having us.
Okay, thanks once again to Dean for giving up his time to speak to us. It sounds like things are a little bit more optimistic for Rochdale at the moment, doesn't it? As you've got a friend who's a big Rochdale fan, as you mentioned before, Mike, and it does sound like, especially with the off-the-field issues, hopefully being in the distant past now. Obviously, I think they've still got to raise a little bit of money for the legal fees they had to take out for that court case, but it sounds like off the field they're in good nick. The problem is on the field they've shown a bit too much loyalty to Stockdale, and the result is they've struggled, haven't they? Yeah, definitely. And I think, by all accounts, a lot of Stockdale's recruitment really wasn't the best. But the fans seem to be actually quite behind Bentley, and they know that he is not going to turn this turd into something shiny. Water into wine, I think, is what you were thinking of there. But you went for the Volvo again. There you go. But people are behind him, and they know that it's going to be a slow process to sort of lift their heads as well, because they just seem completely bereft of confidence. And I mentioned a few weeks ago that if we can go 1-0 up against a struggling team, a few weeks into the season, players start bickering with each other, and it quickly becomes 2 or 3-0. And I think Rochdale could well be that kind of team this week. Yeah, there's every chance of that. And I know people talk, worried about the new manager bounce. There is a good reason why they haven't got any points this season, or 1 point this season. They're not a great side. That's the brutal honesty there. I'm sure Bentley will have a good go at getting them away from trouble, but it's going to be a long, tough season for them, I think it's fair to say. Yeah. So for this weekend's game at Brunton Park, Adam Herczeg is the referee. It's his first season in the EFL. He's taken charge of 4 games so far this season. He's handed out 11 yellow cards and 2 red cards already. So certainly very card happy. Last season, he took charge of the eventful National League playoff semi-final between Wrexham and Grimsby. The one that ended up, I think it was 5-4 in the end. It was an absolutely mental game. He did miss a blatant handball from Mullin for one of the goals in that. So, I'm sure he wouldn't have been happy about that. Last season, he handed out 56 yellow cards and no red cards, funny enough, in 15 games at National League level. So only 15 games at National League suggests I think he might have been quite often. I think he sometimes was a fourth official at Football League level because the name does ring a bell. I've definitely seen it in some of the match previews we've done last season, I'm sure. So there you go. Head-to-head record. 109th meeting between the two sides. I think that might be the team we've played the most in the league.
I think it is, yeah.
I'm going to have a good look through all the ones that I know we've played a lot to try and work out if it is or not, because the only ones I think that might come close would possibly be Darlington and Hartlepool. Maybe Oldham might be quite high up there, although Oldham had that long period in the top flight and that sort of level. So, yeah, I'll have to have a little look and see whether they are or not. So we're playing against the Dale. Well, let's talk about Jim Bentley, manager appointed this week. Do you think it's the right man for them, Mike?
It's one of them. I don't think they'll have had people queuing up to take the job. He did all right at Morecambe, you would think, but at the same time, when he left, Morecambe really kicked on, didn't
Well, I think what you got to remember with his time at Morecambe, a lot of people do say that, and I get it. People say, maybe he was the one holding them back. Actually, off the field, they had a lot of issues during his time as manager. There was times when people weren't getting paid, and I think these days I'm not saying they're splashing money like it's going out of fashion at Morecambe, because they're certainly not. But I think the budget's a little bit less stringent there. I think there's less issues in terms of, worry about paying players and stuff like that. So I think, I'm not saying he would have done exactly the same with the money that, Derek Adams has had. Derek Adams has clearly done a brilliant job at Morecambe, but I think there probably needs to be a little bit of revision there in terms of, Bentley wasn't holding it back. I think he was just the right man at the right time for them. And I think, actually, on that reflection, he's probably the right man at the right time for Rochdale.
Yeah, but at the same time, he didn't set the world alight at AFC File, did he?
That's a weird football club.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones where there's so much ambition there. They throw so much money at it. There's sometimes when I wonder if you're a manager, you're given all that money, you're just tempted to throw the money at players. Rather than think to myself, actually, I could build a decent team here without having to spend all that money. I could get the right players in. And then I suppose when you try and get those players, they know you're a club that's got a lot of money and they demand silly amounts.
Stick an extra zero on it, don't they?
Yeah. So that in itself can actually be quite a tough challenge sometimes. Sometimes it's better to be at a club, almost for Simo, like a club like a Carlisle, where you know what the budget is, you know what you've got to spend, and actually you get the players in you think are right for the team, don't you?
I almost feel for Bentley. It's one of them jobs where if Rochdale go down, I don't think anyone will blame him. But if they stay up, he is a miracle worker, and he's a genius.
Is 5 games in too early to sack? Do you think? I was wondering about this. We talked about this with Dean just before, and they felt though he was right. They knew it was the right time to do it, and I actually tend to agree because when you look back to when Roddy was sacked into that season, when he was sacked, and Simo obviously took over not long after. Yeah, it was awful for the first half of the season, and Simo was real tough, but sometimes you just got to do it, don't you?
Yeah, I think it sounds a bit weird to say 5 games in, but because he was there a lot longer, and I think sometimes once the season is over, clubs want to maybe give managers the benefit of the doubt and go, okay, we'll let them bring some new players in. Next season is a clean slate, and if it starts badly, as it finished badly the season before, then they're out the door. But sometimes with managers, a new season, clean slate, and it works out well for them. But Stockdale, sadly for him, wasn't one of them.
No, I mean, looking at their summer recruitment and their squad, Mike, there's a little bit of experience in there. You got Richard O'Donnell in the net. He's been about quite a bit at Bradford for quite a few years, wasn't he? Diagoraga, we know what player he was with Brentford and then with Morecambe. He's a player who can really boss the midfield on his day. Although he's certainly no spring chicken these days, is he? He's 34 now, I think. Liam Keller we saw last season was real quality, wasn't he? A tiny little player, but he had a real bit of ability on the ball. But beyond that, it's tough, isn't it? Especially in attack. I look at that attack, and Devante Rodney's been round the block with League Two clubs. The rest, Ian Henderson's the one that stands out, isn't he, I suppose?
Yeah, but by all accounts, he's just a shell of the player that he used to be.
He's probably as good to have around the training ground as much as anything, a bit of experience in there as well. at the moment.
Yeah, especially, given the situation that they're in. But I think Henderson is about 4 goals short of being Rochdale's all-time top goal scorer.
Yeah.
Which would be quite incredible, really, because you don't see them records get broken a lot nowadays. Because if somebody scores over 100 goals for a League Two club, they're gone before they get anywhere near that, really, aren't they?
Exactly.
But yeah, it'd be they lost, I think, they lost 3 players to clubs from a higher division.
Yeah,
which...
I mean the ones that stand out. I mean, Egan O'Connell was a very good centre back for them. I mean, obviously he's gone to Charlton. Connor Grant had a bit of ability on the ball. He's gone to MK Dons, and one of the other ones actually, Corey O'Keefe. They signed in January. We touched on it on with the chat with Dean. They only got him on a 6-month deal when he left Mansfield after the initial loan spell with Rochdale. And there was always a feeling of it. He's not going to stay long term here. And obviously, he's gone 10 assists for them last season from wing back. And if you're going to be playing a wing back system and you lose a player who's that important in terms of assists in that role, it's going to be tough, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And just looking at the rest of the squad, really, I mean, Liam Kelly in midfield, you touched on him before. He's a good player, but he's a midget, isn't he?
Yeah.
Which is a battle that I can see us come out on top on. It's just not a lot of names in there, really, that fill me with fear, to be honest.
Yeah, you can kind of hope that, they're I do hope they have a bounce, because I think we both agree, we love trips to Rochdale, don't we? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They are an absolutely proper football club, and the one that you worry for if they go down, I don't think they'd bounce straight back either. No. So yeah, I really want them to stay up, but it's going to be a tough ask, and it feels mad saying that so early into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a tough one for them. I think it depends on whether Bentley can maybe get a few, hardened, old proper good experienced players. What I mean, so into the squad. I think that's the key thing for them. Really, they need to do that. Well, I mean, last time out, we sort of touched on it before, but they drew 1-1 with Crawley. The visitor took the lead just on the stroke of half time. A great finish by Jack Powell. If you go back and see it if you haven't seen it already, nice little move across the box, and then sort of on the edge of the D, he just sort of side foots it into the top corner. Really, really good goal. Responded well in the second half by looks of things, and they got the equaliser when left wing cross was headed in by Tyrese Sinclair. Crawley finished the game with 10 men after having a man sent off with 4 minutes to go, but both sides had to settle for a point and still waiting for their first win, aren't they? So it's going to be a tough fall season, I think, for both of those clubs, actually, to be honest. I think Crawley are going to do a lot worse than a lot of people expected. Let's talk about United then, Dan. Sorry, Mike, not Dan. It's looking a bit better now, isn't it, injury-wise? It's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, because I was thinking before about my sort of prediction for this week, and I think a lot depends on sort of, is Edmondson fit? I hope he is, but we've got to ease him in, certainly. But yeah, Huntington, by all accounts, had a bit of a calf thing going on when he came off on Saturday, which is kind of understandable with the lack of football he's had.
Just protect him. I think he'll be fine. I think they're just protecting him, hence why he's playing midweek basis. No need to lose in that game.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously Feeney had a little run out as well, which is good. So yeah, we're certainly in much better shape than we were a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it's good. Yeah,
I mean, I'm looking at the injury list here. Obviously, you got Dickinson and Dixon, the long-term ACL injuries. Senior, who's coming towards the end of his ACL, hopefully, I think about 6-7 weeks maybe back in training, hopefully, which would be fantastic to see, really, and give us another option down the right. I mean, I think that'll make a big difference to us actually coming up to Christmas as well. Not just in terms of, giving Finn back a break, sort of, from starting games, but actually, you could tell back, just run yourself into the ground for 60-70 minutes. Yeah. And Joel Senior can come on. We've seen Senior's got a bit of ability on the ball, so that'll be really exciting to see when he comes back fit. As you mentioned there, Moxon was back, Feeney's back, so they're probably likely to be back in. Charters is going to be eased back in, I think, isn't he, from his injury? They don't want to rush him too much. So hopefully he'll be back up and running soon as well, giving us another option down the left as well, which is really good to see.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, I said it the other week that I think both wing backs have absolutely run themselves into the ground this season.
Yeah.
So it'll be good for, to give them a little rest where we can afford to.
Definitely. Would you freshen up the fence? Would you take Whelan out for Feeney? I know it's harsh, but...
Yes, to be honest. Which, like you say, it does feel a bit harsh, but I think the sooner that we can get Feeney, Huntington, Mellish building that understanding, the better. Because I think them three are certainly the way forwards. Yeah,
and then the challenges for Barkley and Whelan when they actually come into the team as subs or when players get injured to take a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Feeney has a habit of getting injuries, so, he could well miss out.
Exactly. And Huntington, given his lack of pre-season, he might pick up a little muscular thing here and there. Yeah. So I think there will be opportunities for them, but it's good that, the pressure on them. They know that if they make a mistake, they'll struggle to keep their place in the team.
Exactly that. Right, well, let's do our predictions then. So we'll do Dan's first. Dan always tends to go first in these. Here's what Dan had to say.
I'm going to go for a 3-0 win. I think if Ryan Edmonton's back in the team, I fancy him to get one. Christian Dennis to get another. And Owen Moxon.
Well, there you go. Mike, please tell me your prediction's not exactly the same.
It actually was, but I'll mix it up and I'll change Moxon to Huntington.
Oh, well, there you go. Right, well, I'm going to go for a 4-0 win, which is what Dan went for last week. These big wins never come off. That's the problem there. But I'm going to be optimistic. 4-0 win. I'm going to go for Christian Dennis to score, Patrick to get one, Huntington to get one, and Jamie Devitt will get one coming off the bench. I think he'll score. I fancy Devitt to score one as well.
By the way, the sort of table for predictions, all of us didn't score a single point last week because nobody predicted 1-0 and nobody predicted John Mellish to score. So
it's your two's fault for finally predicting Dennis to score. I kept with it and he was scoring and you just ruined it for me. There you go. Right, well, let's do the X-Files section, Mike, before we wrap things up. Busy-ish week. Fair few things happened, wasn't there? First up, let's go down under, mate, and we're going to Australia. I'm terrible Australian accent. I do. We've definitely got Australian listeners as well, so I do apologise. So Zach Clough, he was on the score sheet for Adelaide United in their 2-2 draw with City rivals Adelaide City in the Australia Cup. United subsequently won the penalty shootout 4-1. I think Clough had been subbed off before that point, so he didn't take any of the penalties. Jerry Yates, once again involved in a 3-3 draw with Blackpool, this time at home against Bristol City. That's like 2 in the space of a couple of weeks, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have a game where it finished a 1-1 draw, and both of the scorers were ex-Carlisle players. That was Bristol Rovers against Shrewsbury Town. And the scorers, of course, were the two Ryans, Loft and Bowman. They score in this game. If you haven't seen, have you seen the video that Shrewsbury Town have done on TikTok?
Yeah.
The M&M one. If you haven't seen it, go and look it up. Look up Shrewsbury Town TikTok or something like that. You'll find it. It's very, very good, to be fair. I'm very impressed with that. Great content. Paddy Madden, he was sent off in Stockport's 1-1 draw with Swindon Town at the weekend. Hallam Hope scored an injury time winner in Oldham's 2-1 victory over Aldershot Town. Aaron Hayden, he got a brace in Wrexham's 3-2 win at Woking. Kedwin Scott, he grabbed his first goal for Notts County in a 4-1 win. Struggling Halifax. Poor Halifax are struggling this season, aren't they? Bottom of the National League, having lost their manager and quite a few key players. Not a great season for them so far. And Mark Beck, he continued his decent run. He scored in Darlington's 1-1 draw with Spennymoor Town. In midweek, Hallam Hope scored again. I haven't written down who he scored against. This is really good practice, Lee, isn't it? I don't know how that's happened. I started writing it down and I've clearly not finished it. So, because the National League play games on Monday as well, didn't they, I think? That's it, because they play on... it's one of the things I do miss about being in the National League, having the bank holiday double-header. Which I don't know why we don't do that in the Football League anymore. It's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Very strange indeed. So, he scored in a 1-1 draw at York City. There you go. So, Oldham having an okay start to the season, I seem to remember. So, not the best, but I'm sure they'll be happy enough that they've got a club to support again now that they've had their takeover. Also in midweek, Steve Swinglehurst, he scored in Annan's 4-1 defeat at Aberdeen in the Scottish League Cup. Doesn't tell the full story of that scoreline though, does it? Because it was 1-1 after full time, and Aberdeen basically, with the the extra fitness of being full time, powered them away in extra time. But it sounded like they were on the ropes quite a bit of that game at Aberdeen, so they'll be pleased to have got away with that. I should say Max Kilsby playing this game as well, which is really good to see as well. Getting a bit more game time with Annan. We haven't done any loan updates on Lewis Bell and Sam Fishburne yet because they've not really done much. They've been sort of coming on as subs or starting games where they're not really having a huge impact so far. So we'll maybe do a little roundup next week if there's been any more news on them too. Transfer news. Mitch Roberts, remember him? He was on loan for the second half of last season. Didn't do a huge amount. He's joined Oldham Athletic on loan from Birmingham City until January. And a name from a couple of seasons ago, Josh Coyote. He's joined MK Dons on loan from Rotherham United for the rest of the season. I think that's a really good move for Coyote, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. He was a good player for us, wasn't he? And it's some loanees, their next loan move is a league down, like with Mitch Roberts. And obviously he's more on the up.
Yeah, obviously with Rotherham being in the Championship, he's probably not likely to feature as much this season for them, is he? So it's a good one for his continued development. A little bit of other news. It's a little bit of transfer news, but not actually happened yet. It looks like Harry McCurdy. He's closing on a move to SPL side Hibernian. That's obviously we're recording this on Wednesday and the window closes on Thursday, so there's no news on that one yet. So he may well have moved by the time you listen to this. But for those wanting to keep an eye out, he plays the first time against an Old Firm team on October the 15th. So if you wait for that one, I think they played Hearts the other week, didn't they? Disappointingly, so he can't feature in that one either. But I'm sure he'll make a lot of friends in Glasgow and on the other side of Edinburgh when he makes that move.
I don't want to I don't know, but he's Rangers, isn't he? Sort of has a thing for Rangers, McCurdy.
He probably would do, because I imagine being a Chelsea fan, there's quite a close connection with Rangers. And
Hibs are the Catholic club in Edinburgh, aren't they?
Yes.
So I think it's probably not going to take him long before he pisses off the Hibs fans somehow. I don't know.
I'm sure he will find a way. He always does. Jared Brandthwaite, he made his first start for PSV this evening, just as we were recording. I think he's just finished that game for PSV Eindhoven against FC Volendam. Really tough afternoon he had, though. 7-1 win for PSV. So
but he played the full 90 as well.
He did play the full 90, and he did make a mistake for the Volendam goal, didn't he? So but I'm sure he'll pick up from that. The 7-1 win tells you they've done pretty well. So there you go. Couple of very loose, tenuous X-Files ones this week. It's hard in at the end. Alessio Bugno, first up. He's been spotted. He's working for a legal firm in Italy, which does mention the fact that he used to play for Carlisle. He specialises in sports consultancy for them. So we'll put that link up on the Twitter feed. I'll get Dan to do that in the next couple of days. And here's one to make us both feel old, Mike, isn't it? Lee Miller's son, Lennon. Yeah, he was named on the bench for Motherwell in their game against Kilmarnock just 2 days after he turned 16 years old. God, I remember him having a kickabout when he was
he would have been
about 6 years old on the Brunton Park pitch after games. Wow.
And that's not even his oldest son, is it?
No, his oldest son's like a GB judo champion or something like that. I think he's really, really high up in GB judo. So, sport runs in the. I think one of his younger ones possibly on Rangers' his books as well. So, it's fair to say the sporting talent runs in the family there. There's a sign that you get it from your genes, don't you? But that said, my dad was a very good runner, and I'm not a very good runner. So my brother's listening here. He definitely got the running genes there. I can tell you that much now. Well, that's it, Mike, isn't it? That's wrapped it up for another week. It's just a case of keeping on going, isn't it, at the moment, really? The form's been pretty good, and I'm sure it'll continue. And just got to pray that no one leaves tomorrow. Touch wood. Right, no one's leaving on deadline day.
I hope it's the most boring transfer deadline day that we've had in a long, long time.
It's mad to think when you go back to the one in January and we were so desperate to get players in and we were panicking and, we had these players announced after the final thing tomorrow. It's kind of like, well, hopefully nothing will happen.
Yeah.
Be boring as hell. But you get the feeling that if something did happen and someone comes in with a big bid for a player, I just have this feeling we'd have someone lined up to come in anyway. I think we'd be okay.
I'd hope so. But
touch wood. That's the hope. Let's hope Greg's got his magic list together and we're ready to go. Thanks once again to our sponsors, the London branch. Always appreciate their support. In terms of upcoming episodes, we'll obviously be doing a preview for the Harrogate game coming up. Trying to fit in that CUFC 11 at some point. We're trying to fit time to do your CUFC 11 as well, Mike. You'll have to come up with yours, won't you? And we've got an interview hopefully lined up soon. I'm just trying to get something sorted for that. So there you go. That's it. Obviously, I should say as well, the episode with Tim Pocock as well. We're going to try and get that sorted too. And I need to actually read the book. I've finished the book I've just been reading, so I'm going to give that book a good read now, and we can talk with me and Dan can have a chat with Tim about it in the near future. And that's it. So thanks for everyone for listening, and up the Blues.
Up the Blues.